Welcome to the Aledo Bearcats Coaches Show podcast, a presentation of Real Country 92.1 Hank FM. Live from Boo Rays in New Orleans and Hudson Oaks, the Aledo Bearcats Coaches Show podcast is brought to you by H5 Sports Barn in Aledo and Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth. And now, here's the voice of the Bearcats, Kevin Lonnquist.
And we welcome you to Boo Rays of New Orleans here in Hudson Oaks as we bring you the best in Cajun food, and there are other locations in the Westoplex. They are in Lake Worth and Crowley. We also want to recognize our two presenting sponsors in H5 Sports Barn in Aledo and Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth. I'm Kevin Lonnquist, and we are back with baseball on the docket for this week, and it is good to be a Bearcat as Aledo flexed its muscle in its series that determined the District 5-5A race last week against Granbury, swept that series by scores of 7-2 and 7-1, and these were no doubt performances by the Bearcats. They have clinched at least a share of the district championship, although they've got the tiebreaker over the Pirates on this. Bearcats are now 21-6, and they are 10-0 in District 5-5A. Final series of the regular season is this week. That's against Azle. The Bearcats play host to the Hornets on Tuesday. Then they travel to Azle on Friday, and then get one of these, and then they for sure get the outright district title. But this will be the fifth consecutive district title, outright or shared by the Bearcats under the direction of Chad Berry. They will be, of course, the top seed in 5A Division I in the Region I bracket when the playoffs begin next week. And as for their playoff opponent, it's looking like Birdville out of District 6-5A, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Another two-segment podcast for you. As always, we will be joined by the aforementioned head coach Chad Berry. Then in our second segment, we will be joined by the two starting pitchers, and these are big young men, and I mean big. When I looked at them, I looked up at them. That is seniors, the senior right-handers. They are Grayson McKelvey and Devin Miller, and they have really done a great job of spearheading this run. They have combined for 11 wins so far for the Bearcats this week, or for this season, rather. First segment, of course, we're joined by Chad Berry. Congratulations, another solid year for this group. Again, fifth district title in a row, won or shared. And this never gets old because I think what it tells me, and I'm sure it would tell you and your players, that when you go into something like this and then you get out of it as you all are doing at 10-0, it shows the hard work, the dedication, and that really started when you all started school back in August.
Oh, yeah, I think and a lot of it's a continuation from last year with so many of them coming back. I think every year the next team wants to raise the bar just that much higher, and this group of seniors has no doubt taken that and run with it.
Mm-hmm. In your words, what else do you think it represents, just in terms of what this streak means? It's one thing to win a district title, but now to be a part of 5 consecutive. What does that represent in your view?
I think it represents stability. The kids buy into what we're doing, they buy into the philosophy and the work ethic and things like that. And I think they trust us because they see the success and they see the teams that have come before them and the players that have come before them and how successful they were. And so I think they see that and they know that it's a proven winning recipe, and so they take off and run with it.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed is that when you and I talked, I think the first time you and I saw each other for this school year was back over at Brewer as the football team was getting ready to play that game, and I was talking to you about this team, and you had this little gleam in your eye about what you felt about this group. I just kind of came away from that conversation that you were pretty excited. And was there something that you saw during the fall workouts that gave you this sense of confidence with this group?
There was just a sense of we had just a lot of really good, talented baseball players, a lot more than we've had in the past. And so the depth was there, and, the superstars are there, and the leadership was emerging as well. And so to have that kind of talent at every position and be able to get some move-in talent as well to help out, I think we were looking at it going, it's ours to lose. Mm-hmm. We've got the talent. We're going to be the most talented team around, and we've got to go out and do something with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it shows, too, because the way that you guys have played in your district, I mean, it was interesting, too, because the first 4 games in district play, very tight games where you guys scored no more than 3 runs, and then there's been this separation here these last couple of weeks. Is there just a point where this team kind of exhaled a little bit and said, we can play to a higher level here, and that's where we started to see these things open up?
I think so. I think they realized that throughout the season, your teams are they're kind of go through some valleys and up on some peaks and things like that. And I think when we started district, we were just kind of down in a valley. We weren't hitting the ball really well, really consistently through up and down the lineup. But we'd seen glimpses of this part of the lineup's hitting when this part of the lineup's hitting, and so we figured if we ever put it all together, we're going to be really, really talented, and I think you've seen that the last 3 weeks for sure.
Sure. And it was interesting because when you and I were texting over the weekend, we were talking about the big sweep over Granbury last week. You said something to me in a note that you were really impressed by how locked in this group was for both of those matchups. They understood the stakes of those two games against the Pirates and just the way that they played. Take us through what you saw in those two ball games last week.
Well, when they showed up on Monday to get ready to go, there's some Mondays I have to kind of rein them in and tell them, hey, we got to get focused. We got to get ready to play. Stop all the horseplay and stuff like that. Typical stuff that teenagers do. When I arrived that Monday of the Granbury series, it was business. It was something that like you'd see in the playoffs where everybody's locked in and everybody knows what's at stake. And I think they felt like they had to go out and prove something that week, and I think they did. I probably did less coaching last week and just sat back and watched and just let them go and just let them get after it. And if they can do things like that, they're going to be a tough team to beat.
I was going to ask you from that standpoint, is that one of the few times during a district season where a coach has just kind of sat on the bench and just kind of let it go? And what is that feeling like when you just kind of say, okay, it's yours, go do it?
Well, when I can release that to them, it's a great feeling. I can sit back and just say, you know what, I'm going to guide you a little bit here and there. I may talk to one or two of you here and there about maybe pitch selection or this or that, or maybe we should do this with the ball. But for the most part, it's just letting them go, letting them play the game. I coach them during practice all week long until, if I don't have to coach them in the games, that's great. That's their time to shine, and that's their time. And so I just try to hopefully let them play the game and get after it and not have to think about it too much.
And the aggregate score of this two-game series last week against Granbury was 14-3. And keep in mind, this was a Granbury team that had won 11 straight games. So is that a case kind of piggybacking on what you were just talking about, where this group was focusing on itself versus what the scouting report was telling you all about what the Pirates were all about?
I think I've said it all along that our biggest opponent is ourselves. I've said that there's not going to be many teams that step onto the field with us that have as much talent on paper as we have. But, we still have to go out and we still have to prepare and we still have to be ready to play and then go execute. I think there was probably some teenage bantering going back and forth between Granbury and Aledo this week on the social media stuff. And I'd kind of gotten a little bit of wind here and there, little bits and pieces of it from my own son at home who kind of keeps up with all that stuff. And I think, Granbury was 8-0. We were 8-0. We both had very similar records, both pretty high ranked up in the state.
Right.
And, it was something had to give. And I told our kids, I said, don't wait around to see if they're going to throw the first punch. Let's go.
And the intensity was there. I wondered, too, I remember this is our third time to visit here, and I've talked to you about those tournaments in February where you were facing Class 6A schools. And I'm wondering if a series performance like this against Granbury is a product of what those tournaments in February prepared you for.
I think so, because I know the Tuesday game, we saw their big right-hander that, he's upper 80s, low 90s. And, I think for most of the season in district, he's been able to go out there and just throw his fastball right by everybody. And when he couldn't do that from the get-go Tuesday night, I think you could see it on the faces of their defense, and I think they kind of were a little nervous and a little uneasy, and I think we ended up putting up five on him in the first 2 innings.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, too, about just the one you guys deliver that. It's like being prepared, meeting the moment, that sort of thing. And that's what this school's athletic department's culture has been like, being able to meet those moments because of what's happened over the years, not only with football, with all the other sports, with all the success, too. But so maybe this is an old hat thing, even though it's a new team, new players, new culture, new perspective, that sort of thing. But I would suspect, though, because of this has been going around in this school for many, many years, that the kids who are coming up through it, even for Grayson, who just got here, but maybe he kind of picked up on it quickly, is this is about meeting the moment, and it's not about, like, let's just not be happy to be there, that sort of thing, I would suspect.
No, it's when we get to these moments, this is what we've worked to get to these big moments, and now it's our moment. Let's go get it. Let's go take the moment. It's our moment.
Okay.
We've worked for it.
All right, so let's just talk about these two starting pitchers who are going to be joining us here in Grayson McKelvey and Devin Miller. What have you seen from these two? I'll talk about their stats here when they join me here in the next segment. But what have you seen from these two, and have you pretty much kept them in the rotation where one goes on Tuesday, the other one goes on Friday? How have you been, because I think Grayson goes on Tuesdays and then Devin goes on Fridays. But just talk about what you've seen from those two and why you decided to put them in that rotation like you did.
I don't think I really had to decide to put them in there. They earned their way in there by past performances during the tournaments and things like that. Devin's he was a Friday guy for us last year as a junior. Grayson came in this year and knocked in the door and said, "I'm here, and somebody's going to have to beat me out for that Tuesday spot, or it's mine." And so, they've both just taken it and run with it, and they both have tremendous work ethic. They're both starting to really emerge as leaders. And, I think it's when those two guys are on the mound, our kids feel like it doesn't matter who we're playing, we're going to win. We'll find a way because they're going to hold them in check, and we're going to score enough runs to beat them.
So when you're evaluating who will be your starting pitchers, obviously Devin was coming back from last year, and as you mentioned a few moments ago, Grayson kind of pitched his way into earning that Tuesday starting slot there. What's kind of the criteria that you and Coach Evans will use to determine that, making that assessment of how those guys will earn those spots?
To me, it's all based on, command. Can they mix their pitches up? How do they handle adversity? Can they pitch themselves out of jams? Can they stay ahead in the count, pound the zone, things like that? Efficiency, not trying to strike everybody out type stuff, trying to let hitters get themselves out. But more than anything, it's eliminate the walks as much as possible. Keep your defense involved. I'm a big believer in that walks and errors go hand in hand. And so to me, if you got a guy that's out there and he's in the zone all the time and the ball's getting put in play consistently, it keeps your defense on their toes, and they play better behind you that way. And both of these guys have done that really well all year.
I was going to say, if your defense is playing on the balls of its feet, that means that they're pretty active. If they're sitting on their heels, then you've got a problem there because you're missing the zone quite a bit on this. Let's talk a little bit about this week as we wrap things up. Again, taking on the Azle Hornets. And this was something similar that I asked of softball coach Heather Myers last week. Virtually, and I using air quotes here, nothing on the line except for the outright title. But what's the challenge for you and your staff to keep this team engaged? Because there's still something about playing to a standard, even though everything is pretty much locked in for what your playoff situation will be. So how do you approach a week like this?
I told them it's a great week for us to get some guys on the mound, get some other guys in and out of the lineup a little bit that might help us out down the stretch in playoffs. And I said, at the same time, you guys have a unique opportunity. In the last 5 teams that have won district, not one of them has gone undefeated. And so you have an opportunity to set yourself apart this week. I want you to be able to do that, but we got to go win Game 1 tomorrow first. We got to get to 11-0 before we can get to 12-0.
Okay, and so in terms of just looking the playoffs here, again, the Bearcats will open up next week in the 5A Division I, Region 1 bracket. Looking like the Birdville Hawks, a team you actually saw in a Saturday non-district game a couple of weeks ago. You beat them 15-5, but unless anything else is different, just tell us about 6-5A, how that's shaping up, and if it wouldn't be Birdville, what would we be looking at here for next week?
To me, if it wasn't Birdville, it would have to be somebody like Richland or somebody like that. But I'm pretty sure their 4 teams are already locked in based on tiebreakers and things like that. So Colleyville and Birdville are going to be the Division I teams out of District 6-5A, and they're going to be battle tested. They'll be a very good team. I know they're the 4th place team in their district, but they'll be very battle tested. They've played the state's top-ranked team twice. They've played Colleyville twice. They've played Argyle, who's a perennial power, twice. And so there's really no down teams or any off weeks for them in their district. So every week is a battle to get in.
The alarming thing when I was looking at that district, as you were mentioning, because Grapevine, I think, won the state championship last year. And, of course, I've seen some in my 100 years of doing this, Colleyville Heritage has had some great teams there. when Alan McDougall was running that program for many, many years. And, of course, we've seen what Argyle has done over the last couple of years, got down to the state finals 2 years ago, got to the regional finals last year. I was really shocked at Argyle's. They're going to get in, but it's not like we've seen the Argyle teams of the past.
Yeah, I think you're going to have you're not going to have a chance to just be the dominant team year in and year out. You're going to have some down years from time to time to where maybe you have a class that comes through that's just not as deep, not as talented, and it's kind of I don't know if you call it a rebuilding year or it's a growing up year where they may be playing a lot of youngsters. I don't know, but it's hard to maintain that level year after year after year, especially when just like our kids know, every time you step on the field, you have a target on your back because of the A on the front of your shirt.
Mm-hmm. Going back real quickly to Birdville. So, again, we mentioned that you had played them in a Saturday non-district game a couple weeks ago. And those Saturday games can be a little bit up and down because you're throwing a different bunch of arms out there for guys who may not have had a lot of innings during the course of the year. So it's a different kind of game. But is there anything that you draw from that meeting against Birdville? Because you also played them at your place last year, too, in a Saturday non-district game. So how do you or do you just say that game doesn't mean anything because of the circumstances surrounding it, even though you all won 15-5? Or what do you take from a game like that because you have seen them?
Well, a lot of those Saturday games are about getting guys in that haven't gotten a lot of work out of the bullpen. It may be getting some guys in that hadn't got as much playing time here lately after the tournaments have stopped. And so, you use those games to build depth in your bullpen. Mm-hmm. If you have a starter that's struggling, maybe you get them a few extra at-bats that weekend. But other than that, a lot of times it's about trying to get other kids in and keep them involved in case, if somebody goes down to injury, you want somebody that hasn't been sitting on the bench for a month and a half.
Sure.
But I think taking from that game, nothing more than we know what we can do to this team if we go out and play. Now, I know they didn't play their starters, but we didn't play ours either. So, you can take a little bit from that game, but you can't really base how the series is going to go based on that one single game.
Sure, and I would imagine so because of the circumstances you just indicated, didn't use your top arms, didn't use your regular lineup 1 through 9. You were giving other guys a chance to get at-bats and innings and that sort of thing, too. I would think, too, for you all, I would imagine, though, after you got done playing Granbury, you were probably looking at Birdville ahead a couple weeks before the Granbury series, but then once you cleared the Granbury series, you kind of locked in more on Birdville, I would suspect.
For sure. I've kept up with their district and all the other ones around, just kind of trying to see who I think, we might see down the road, who could be here and there. I'm trying to play what if, but right now it's Birdville, and nobody cares what's down the road if you don't get past them.
Exactly. And then, of course, I would suspect, too, you have not made any preliminary plans for playoff details or anything, or have you?
Have not yet.
Yeah.
That's
we don't want to jinx that moment there on that sort of thing. And so, anyway, well, listen, congratulations to you on this, Chad. It's been really fun watching this team grow and just take off here in District 5A. Again, 5th consecutive district championship for this program under his direction. And we want to thank you for being with us. And we will see you next week as the Bearcats are getting ready to open up the playoffs run. So for all of you Bearcat baseball parents out there, bring more of them out here to Boo Rays of New Orleans so we can enjoy the podcast with the Bearcats. Coach, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right. And we also want to remind you, too, that this podcast is brought to you by H5 Sports Barn. H5 Sports Barn and Nye Physio and Performance can help unlock your athletic potential and elevate your game like the Aledo Bearcats. With expert sports physical therapy, tailored recovery plans, and top-notch sports performance training, H5 Sports Barn, proud supporters of the Aledo Bearcats. And we're also brought to you by Hiley Mazda. Head to Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth today. Their new state-of-the-art facility is conveniently located just off of I-30. I pass it all the time when I'm coming out here. Exit Las Vegas Trail and experience top-notch service and hassle-free buying. Don't forget to ask about this month's special offers. Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth, family-owned and operated for more than 30 years. Stick around. The second segment of the Aledo Coaches Show podcast continues after this timeout. When that does return, we're going to have the senior right-handed starting pitchers, Grayson McKelvey and Devin Miller. We'll be right back. And back here on the Aledo Coaches Show podcast, I'm Kevin Lonnquist coming to you from Boo Rays of New Orleans here in Hudson Oaks. Our second segment is going to be featuring a couple players here, but first let's give you a couple of Aledo notables. And if you got a minute, here's what's going on here. Don't forget, the softball playoff runs begins their bid to return to the state tournament in Austin. They will begin for the Lady Cats in the 5A Division I Region I bracket. They will take on Colleyville Heritage. That is a best-of-3 series. All of those games are being played at Saginaw Chisholm Trail Wednesday and Thursday, and if there is a deciding third game, that will be on Friday. All of those will be 6:30 starts. Then Aledo will have a strong representation at the Class 5A state track meet May 1st and through the 3rd in Austin. From the Region 1 track meet last week in Lubbock, the boys and girls each finished 3rd in the team standings. Moving on to the state meet for the girls is Molly Garrison in the 1600 and the 3200 and Emma Ralph in the pole vault. And then moving on for the boys is Adam Everett in the 300-meter hurdles, Braylon Brown in the pole vault, and then the 4x400 meter relay team comprised of Lincoln Tubbs, Trey Warner, Jace Lacey, and Adam Everett. And then in girls golf, Emily Click qualified for the girls state tournament next week in Austin from last week's regional golf tournament out in Lubbock. And finally, we are expecting the Aledo ISD to be naming a new boys basketball coach for Brian Blackburn, who resigned earlier this year to take a college job at NAIA University of Tampa, as well as a new girls soccer coach to replace Brian Johnson, who announced his retirement earlier this year. Lots of news going on this spring for Aledo Athletics. Okay, we are pleased to be joined. To my far left is senior right-hander Devin Miller, and then to my immediate left is senior right-hander Grayson McKelvey. Let's hear it for these young men. First time they give you that kind of ovation, right, all year?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay. Congrats on the season to you both and, of course, to your team. Let's start talking about the Granbury series last week. As we know in this game, it always comes back to starting pitching. Starting pitching wins. And game one, the 7-2 victory. Grayson, you got the nod there, of course, because it was Tuesday. 4 2/3 innings, 7 strikeouts, 2 hits. Then in game two, the 7-1 win. Devin, you went the distance, scattering 6 hits. Going the distance, meaning 7 innings, 8 strikeouts. I'm going to start with you on this, Grayson, because you kind of had to set the tone about facing a hot lineup like a Granbury, who had won 11 straight. So what was kind of your plan of attack going after that lineup?
Yeah, so really what I started off with was just trying to see, what they're trying to do with the ball, whether they're trying to go oppo, whether they're trying to go and pull the ball. So I really think they were trying to go oppo starting off, so I just kept on going in, got in weak contact, struck some guys out, and that was it. Just keep trying to win at bats. Okay,
and then Devin, you come back to finish up the series last Friday. So take us through the approach. How much did you chart? Because you're charting him, I would presume, correct?
Oh yes, sir. We have some chart guys that kind of follow the game.
Okay, so when you're watching, you're watching him go after this lineup on Tuesday. So what was your approach to Friday's start?
So my approach every week is kind of the same. Just throw strikes, let the guys hit it, trust my defense behind me because we got a good squad and I want to let them play because I trust them and throw strikes, keep the pitch count low, and go the distance, like you said.
Okay, and then for you, and I would imagine, though, in both of these games, did it feel like a stressful start for each of you, given the fact of what was on the line here? And if it wasn't, what was it like throwing in those innings because of what you were dealing with? I'll start with you on this, Devin.
I kind of attack every game the same. It's just another day at the ballpark, another game. I kind of try and limit the outside noise. I kind of lock in once the first pitch is thrown and kind of go from there, and I just kind of approach it as the same every week.
How about for you, Grayson?
I felt pretty good going into it. We have a really talented squad, and, they were hot, but so were we. So, I felt good. Okay, so let's take us through your season here. I'm going to ask you guys about your repertoire, what you consider to be your strikeout pitch. What is your out pitch velocity? Are you at a point where you can, are you at a point where each of those repertoires where you can throw any pitch in any count? And is that something you kind of have to run past him to throw at any count? And I'm pointing to Coach Barry on this. I'll start with you on this, Grayson, in terms of just take us through your repertoire and, like I said, strikeout pitch, out pitch, and where you've topped out velocity-wise. Yeah, so I've got fastball, slider, and changeup. I'd say fastball and slider for sure can go any count. Changeup, not so much. That's not really my out pitch, but I'd say fastball and slider are honestly equal, but with the fastball, with my velocity I have, I'd say fastball is probably the out pitch.
Do you throw a 2 and a 4, or do you just throw 4?
Just a 4.
Just a 4. And what has that been topping out at velocity?
93, 94, just depends on the day.
Only 93, 94. Okay, what about for you, Devin?
So I have a fastball, curveball, changeup as well. I like throwing all my pitches for strikes, and so I kind of go to whichever one I'm feeling that day. And my fastball has been up to 91 And I would say my strikeout pitch is kind of whichever one I'm feeling that day. My changeup's real good. I love going to my changeup, especially when I get down in counts and I'm not really there with my fastball command. But my curveball is also pretty good in my opinion, and I use that in counts a lot too.
Okay, so in that curveball, does that have a 12-6 motion where it's over the top, or how do you throw that?
I would say 12-6, 11-7, something like that.
Okay, and then on your changeup there, Grayson, just getting back to you in terms of just working on that pitch, is that a pitch that's fairly new, or is that something you've just had to work on over the last few months, or how would you describe that pitch?
Yeah, I'd say it's just something I'm still tinkering with. Just hasn't came as natural to me as the off-speed has.
Is it because you have to stick the ball so deep in your hand on that, and that's a different feel than when you're just letting it loose on a four-seamer?
Yeah, I'd just say, with the fingers you hold it with, it just is not as natural to me.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you both this question about this, because we talked about the dominance of what you all had in the Granbury series. But what do you think each of you learned from facing those Class 6A lineups in those tournaments back in February? I'm going to start with you on this, Grayson, because that's what you came here. That's part of the reason why you moved in over here, was to face great competition so that could get you ready for the next level. But what do you think you took from those games in February that maybe helped you prepare and then pitch like you did against Granbury?
Yeah, I'd say it's just definitely, 1 through 9 is definitely a lot deeper. The talent's there for sure. So it's just really like you don't really get free outs. So, just making sure you're going through the whole lineup, staying ahead in counts, just throwing strikes. So no free outs.
What about for you, Devin?
Kind of feeding off what he said, like the depth is always there. Some of these other teams we're playing, I mean, they might not have as many guys, but there's definitely still those guys that are those big power hitters, contact, that are hot right now. And I just kind of approached them like I did those 6A lineups and just threw strikes and trusted my defense behind me. Okay,
so for Devin this year, he stands at 6'4". That's why I keep looking up at these guys. Even when they're sitting down next to me, I'm still looking up at them. But Devin, 6'4". This year, his record is 5-0, has thrown 37 innings. He's struck out 45, has allowed 5 walks with an ERA of .95. So I want to ask you, because when you started becoming a pitcher and you wanted this to be your primary thing in this game of baseball, what do you think has been the key to your growth as a pitcher and just understanding how to pitch?
Growing up, I've always loved pitching. That's always been my go-to, what I've kind of been best at. And I've just kind of grown as I've grown up, and I've just learned different things, how to pitch this, how to do that, and I think that's helped me along the way.
Has there been any pitchers, you can even at the major league level, that you don't want to say you want to build your game off of, but you look at that and inspired you?
Not anyone in particular. I love watching baseball. It's one of my favorite things, like every day. I'm an Angels fan because I grew up in California, so I love watching them. And just every guy, I see what they're good at, what their weaknesses are, hitters, how they attack, and I kind of just go off of that and base my starts off of that sometimes.
If they can only keep Mike Trout healthy for a full season, right?
That's for sure.
Okay, then for you, Grayson, you're 6'3", you're the moving from Southwest Christian. Same thing for you, but let's give you his numbers first. Record of 6-2, has thrown 32 1/3 innings, has struck out 52, allowed 9 walks, an ERA of 1.20. Same kind of question for you, but the transition from TAPS ball to Class 5A ball, what do you think you've learned about pitching overall?
Both the districts I feel like have been fairly the same, but, I really just think it's about throwing strikes and, letting your defense work behind you.
Is it something where you have to say, of just changing speeds? This is something that I've asked every pitcher that's come on my show, whether it's softball or baseball, about changing speeds, changing eyes, about where the pitch is. What have you learned from that part of it?
Yeah, definitely changing speeds, changing eye levels. That's a big part of it. Throwing strikes only does so much to you. If you're just throwing down the middle every time, you're going to start getting hit. But if you can mix that up, that's when you're successful. Okay, so let's talk about one thing I asked you guys to think about here before you came on with me is about the difference in throwing ball at the high school level and throwing it in club ball level. Of course, you guys have gone through the summer tours for as long as you've been doing this, and that's a long time to be doing this. I want to ask you about, you're facing deeper lineups likely at the club level or the spring level, if you will, or even in the fall if you're playing in the fall. But I've always wondered about the intensity of that kind of ball versus high school ball, because in the summer leagues, you're going from game to game, tournament to tournament, and obviously you're facing better caliber of hitters, but I'm wondering if the intensity is different because of what's at stake in high school versus what you're dealing with in these summer tours. I want you to start with this, Devin, and just tell me what your thoughts are about that.
So going off the intensity, I think it's different because you don't have as big of a crowd sometimes, and you don't got your school behind you. It's more of a professional atmosphere, and so I guess going on intensity, I would say it is a little more intense in my opinion because, like we're talking about with depth of each lineup, I mean, there's always those guys that are committed, people are talking about, and in summer ball, I would say there's a lot more of those. So you go into the game not really thinking about one, but the whole lineup and what you want to do to each of those batters and go from there.
Okay, and what about for you, Grayson? What do you think you've learned from both kinds of ball that you've played?
Yeah, I'd say school ball is definitely more intense, like from the crowd, that type of that atmosphere. But summer ball, you never really know what you're going to get when you show up that day to the park. So, you could have a lineup with 6 committed dudes. You really don't know. So there's definitely intensity in both ways.
Yeah, I was going to say because if you're playing against teams in the summer, where again, as you both mentioned, a lot of those guys are committed, maybe are going to be playing in college or something like that. Do you sense from those when they're at the plate that there may not be that intensity versus what you might have heard from them or scouting reports on those guys, or how do you or can you pick up on things like that from a body language standpoint? I'll start with you on this, Grayson.
Yeah, it just kind of depends, I think there's a lot if you're committed, you're probably pretty professional. So, you just got to attack them and you got to do what you do, play your game. So, I mean, really when you're in the summer and you don't know what you're up against, so you just got to, do your thing.
Okay, and then for you, Devin.
Yeah, kind of what he said. Everyone's been playing ball since they were little, or at least most people, especially guys that are maybe committed right now. And so they've been through it. They've been through it before. They play summer ball like we do, spring ball, and so they come up ready, and we gotta come ready too.
Okay. In a week like this, and you heard Coach Berry talk about this, in this run of 5 consecutive district championships, neither of the first 4 teams have gone undefeated. You have a chance to do that this week. Obviously, that's not the goal. The goal is to get to Austin and try and win a 5A Division I state championship. But how do you both treat a week like this in terms of just preparation? Do you kind of have to, because there's going to be, let's face it, we're not going to have the same kind of mental and the kind of intensity for Azle this week as you all did for Granbury last week. So how do you have to summon that to make sure that you still do your job like you would treat Azle like it would be Granbury? I'll start with you on this, Grayson.
Yeah, I'd say, we just really have a chance to do something special that hasn't been done in a long time. So that's kind of the motivation there is, Azle, we've already clinched the district championship, but it's doing that next step, that next level of being able to do something that hasn't been done in a while.
Okay, and then for you, Devin.
I would say we have to treat it almost as a Granbury atmosphere, and we have to come with Azle knowing that we need to win, and we still need to get past this week to get to next week, and so we have to have that same level of intensity and get through this week before next.
Okay, so you're a lifer in this program too, Devin. So what's it like just seeing how this program has grown? Even though it's won a lot of district championships, it's had some pretty solid playoff runs in the past. But what have you seen in this program in terms of its growth from your being a freshman to here you are now a senior?
We've always been a good squad. We have a good team, but this year we got a special team. We have different ball players, some guys that treat the game more serious, and I think it's going to help us in the long run.
Is that part of the reason for you, Grayson, what attracted you to this program here? Because obviously success will always attract great players, but now that you're in it and you're about to wrap up a regular season, what did you learn from when you got here in August to as you're going through this first and only season?
Yeah, I'd say definitely it's just like if you play at Aledo, you've always got a target on your back, just like Coach Berry said. There's a different stigma around here, Aledo, it's winter. That's it. There's no other options. So.
And you had a pretty good career, too, at Southwest Christian. In fact, they just won their TAPS district again. So I'm sure you could probably keep up with some friends over there. And so they've had another great season. Collegiately speaking, for these 2 young men, Grayson is going to be moving on to Abilene Christian, and then Devin will be at Cal State Fullerton. Grayson, you said you have to be there in what, July?
Yep. Yes, sir.
And then, Devin, you have to be there out in California out in what, August or something like that.
A week before school starts.
Wow.
Sir.
Okay. I want to ask you about the opportunity to pitch at the next level and collegiately. I know, Grayson, you might have some things potentially with the Major League Baseball draft, but that's another story down the line. But just the opportunity to pitch at the next level. I'll start with you on this, Grayson. Going to Abilene Christian, what does that opportunity mean to you?
I think it's just really something that everybody dreams about as a kid. Everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to go play college baseball as a kid, whether it's most of us from Aledo, we grew up going to watch TCU baseball games. So, I think it's just a dream come true, really. And
then for you, and you get to go back home to California too.
Yes, sir.
There.
Yeah. So I grew up around Orange County. I grew up going to Cal State Fullerton games all the time. My dad used to go there. He used to play there. He won a World Series there, and I think it's pretty special. It's a dream come true, like he said, that I get to go play there and follow in his footsteps and maybe do something even bigger.
Okay, and you're going to be better than when he was at Fullerton, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I figured on that. And then, of course, just looking ahead to the playoffs, guys, again, take care of business this week against Azle. And then how does the mindset shift, I should say, about just getting ready for the playoffs? You've been through this on both sides. You were through it with the TAPS level, of course, and then Grayson, and of course for Devin, you've been through this many, many times. But how does that mindset shift? Because I can say it right this time. But how does it change for you, Devin? Just getting ready for the playoffs.
You know, I think, like I said earlier, you just kind of got to approach every game the same. It's not, you don't want to let the nerves get to you or anything. You just got to attack it, throw in strikes, stretch your defense, because we got a good squad and we're going to make it happen. And
then for you, Grayson.
Yeah, like Devin said, got to treat every game the same. I think we should, if we treat it just like district, we're fine. Win every game. That's about all we can do. So.
All right. So to my far left is Devin Miller. To my immediate left is Grayson McKelvey. Give these two young men a great hand for being with us tonight. And we want to remind you that we are brought to you by H5 Sports Barn. H5 Sports Barn and Nye Physio and Performance can help unlock your athletic potential and elevate your game like the Aledo Bearcats. With expert sports physical therapy, tailored recovery plans, and top-notch sports performance training, H5 Sports Barn, proud supporters of the Aledo Bearcats. And Hiley Mazda, head to Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth today. Their new state-of-the-art facility is conveniently located just off of I-30, exit Las Vegas Trail, and experience top-notch service and hassle-free buying. Don't forget to ask about this month's special offers. Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth, family-owned and operated for more than 30 years. Next week, we start talking about the playoffs with both softball and baseball. Hopefully, we'll be talking with softball coach Heather Myers about a successful first-round win over Colleyville Heritage, and Coach Barry will return for his playoff opener preview against who we think will be Birdville at this point. So, for my engineer Brian Torres and for the Hank FM promotion staff, I'm Kevin Lonnquist. Thank you for being with us each week. We'll talk to you all next week from Boo Rays of New Orleans here in Hudson Oaks for the Aledo Coaches Show podcast. So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Aledo Coaches Show podcast, brought to you by H5 Sports Barn in Aledo and Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth. With the voice of the Bearcats, Kevin Lonnquist. Please like and subscribe to this podcast and tell a friend. You're also welcome to join us every Monday night at 7 for Boo Rays of New Orleans in Hudson Oaks. It's the Aledo Coaches Show podcast, a presentation of Real Country 92.1 Hank FM.